the immense historical record of New York State using waterways like giant sewers. The immense history of New York State using rivers and lakes all over the state to dump industrial wastes and microplastics and sewage and pathogens and prions and bacteria and toxins, all kinds of industrial waste, slopped and dumped all over New York State for many, many decades. New York State probably deserves a gold medal for slopping up its waterways with all kinds of wastes and sewage and chemicals and dyes and colorants and cement processing and PCBs. Oh, God, PCBs. Now, right across the street from the big PCB processing plant there in Fort Edward, Hudson Falls, right straight across where they processed all the dredgings from the Hudson River, there's a cemetery called Union Cemetery. And my mother and father are buried across the street from the big PCB plant of General Electrics in Fort Edward. And a lot of my ancestors from Hudson Falls and Glens Falls and Lake George in the general area are all interned at Union Cemetery as well. My knowledge of the flushing and dumping and slopping and spewing of industrial waste and sewage and all kinds of just nasty crap all over New York State, the history of it is extensive. Now, this particular message is going to the Lake George Association. And my old friends, Kathy Flack Munsell, I went to school with Kathy, and George Penzel, the Water Quality Committee there of the Lake George Association and RPI University and Darren Freshwater Institute and the Jefferson Project. I want all of the above, including the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Warren County Sheriff's Office, the Warren County Attorney's Office, the Warren County District Attorney's Office, and the courts of Warren County sitting there along Route 9, just to the south of the FM 149, Farm to Market 149, and just north of the Glen Lake Road at the Municipal Center. I want everybody involved, everybody, especially the Department of Environmental Conservation Internal Investigations, DEC, Internal Investigations, the immense dumping and leaching, all those septic systems that leach into Lake George. The whole Lake George Basin is contaminated with septic tank squeezins. There's brownfields, lots and lots of septic leach fields all around Lake George that have contaminated the soils, and they're leaching into the crevices and cracks in the bedrock all around Lake George, leaching into the crevices and cracks, into the springs, into the groundwater that feed the lake. And all of this flushing of the wintertime drawdown of Lake George, the drawdown, that's what you do when you flush a toilet. You draw down the reservoir and you flush the commode. It's the same thing they've been doing on Lake George for decades. And David Wick and the Lake George Park Commission and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation flushing Lake George with dam number 230, Dam A, the upper privilege, is a matter of historical reality. That's why they're fixing all those septic tanks all over Lake George. That's why the Glens Falls banks are loaning millions, and the state of New York is giving away millions to fix all those crappy leach field septic tank systems. You don't fix something if it's not broke. Tom West of the Fund for Lake George. You don't fix it unless it's broke. And this is going directly to Sheriff James LaFar, the Warren County Sheriff. You don't fix it, Jim, unless it's broke. It's kind of like that dark brown garwood that unlawfully turned in front of, crossed the oncoming path of the Alexander West boat. That low slung, sits low in the water, dark brown garwood, after dark would have been very difficult to see in the first place. Hitting a low slung dark brown garwood, accidents happen. And driving in front of the Alexander West boat was an unlawful navigational move. The West boat had the right of way. Plain and simple, Jim LaFar. So there's little details and nuances to the massive leachate contamination of Lake George. All that septic tank crap going down to the bedrock, hitting the crevices and the cracks, leaching into the springs, and going right into the lake. I taught everybody about those 6,000 septic tanks, and that would include the Jefferson Project, Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, and the Darren Freshwater Institute with DEC. Because you see, old Clifford Witham began exposing all those septic tanks back in the 1960s. He also exposed the massive flushing of industrial wastes and chemicals and sewage on the Lachute River, using Lake George as a flusher reservoir. Ask Dave Wick and Roger Smith. Flush, 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 flush the Lachute River, using Lake George as a big flusher reservoir. The Lake George Park Commission, well, you can try to color it any way you want to, but that's the reality of it. You know, dilution is the solution to pollution. And dumping all that stuff over to Lake Champlain, 1,500 acres. 1,500 acres, 1.5 million cubic feet of industrial waste, laced and contaminated and all mixed together with Ticonderoga's open sewers into the Poop Chute River. That's historical reality. And I suggest the Chapman Museum and the Lake George Association and the Lake George Wild Forest Gang and the Lake George Land Preservation Agency there, the Lake George Land Conservancy, and the, what do you call it there, the Adirondack Park Commission and Nature Conservancy. It just goes on and on and on and on and on, ladies and gentlemen. 6,000 septic tank leach fields, creating brown fields all around Lake George. Where in the hell do you think all of that stuff goes when it goes down and leaches down to the bedrock and then it goes down to the lake? Particularly in the springs that feed the lake. So to Tom West, I guess he's general counsel for the Fund for Lake George, and to Kathy Flack Munsell and to George Penzel of Boats by George, we got a couple of questions that need to get answered here about the immense history of New York State and their shit dumping and shit flushing policies, practices, and customs. Have a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen. Remember one thing, Swamp Fox knows the score.